Hello and welcome to SLP Full Disclosure. I am your host, Jennifer Martin, and joining me is my cold-hearted sidekick, Jonathan Carey.
Why am I cold-hearted now?
No, it's literally cold-hearted because it's freezing here in Colorado today.
That is very true.
And I have a feeling your heart's cold.
It was literally like 1 degree earlier this morning. So yeah, I am, I guess, cold-hearted literally, but
it's barely beating.
Yeah, well, and 2 nights ago I was camping in Arches National Park, and I was definitely cold-hearted then, so because it was freezing.
So it still hasn't even thawed from that. So even if it wasn't cold here, you'd still be cold-hearted.
Just a perpetual cold heart.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. You're cold-hearted. So it's just now it's just your new condition.
Yeah.
So, well, I know luckily we don't have that many cold days here, but I know that a lot of people are cold across the United States right now. I knew it was going to be bad when my dog was like breathing on the outside the glass door and it was immediately freezing. I was like, oh, this tells me everything I need to know.
Yeah, that's a sign. So, but hopefully, when people are listening to this in March, it's nice and good spring temperatures.
Yes. So. I'm hoping your heart's thawed by the time people are listening.
Yeah, that would be ideal.
Yeah. Well, I am really, really glad that our guest, Angie Merced, is going to be joining us today because I feel like there's a new term that's, I don't know what's being used more, COVID or burnout. I feel like they're both equally used and probably one is leading to another, but we have a very unique guest in that she is an SLP and a life coach that helps SLPs that are feeling a little bit burned out. Do you think she could help you, Jonathan? Thaw your cold heart.
That might be a lost cause. So
it's too late.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure Angie would say it's never too late. So let me tell you a little bit about her before we get into our conversation. Angie is a certified life coach and a school-based speech-language pathologist. She lives with her husband and 2 little girls in Rochester, New York. And her dream and passion is to eliminate burnout culture in our field and empower SLPs who feel overwhelmed, overworked, and trapped in a career they are supposed to love. And she shows her clients how to reclaim their energy, create more time, and generate resources. Her mission is to help smart SLPs do less, be more, and thrive with joy in the life they have. She emphatically believes that is the key to the survival and future of our field. So welcome, Angie Merced. So welcome, Angie Merced. We are so happy to have you on the podcast.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, well, I like I said to you earlier, where were you 10, 15 years ago in my life? But better late than never. So I think this is very timely, this subject that we're going to be talking about.
Yes. I could talk about burnout for days.
Yes. Well, before we get started into the nitty gritty of it, I always just like to begin with, what is your professional story? It's always so fascinating to me how people ended up in this profession and how did you land to where you are now professionally?
Yes. So, okay. How much? Because it's one of those things that I started off in like psychology and human services type field, but then one of my psychology professors mentioned speech pathology and that it was so random. Like he said, oh, they make really good money too. So I was like, oh, well, I'll just try that. Right. And it turns out, right. I loved it. Right. But, I said, it's more scientific, but is it? So anyway, I got into speech pathology. I started off working with preschoolers and going into homes and doing itinerant work. And that really gave me, that was like my first 6 years of my career. And that really gave me like a chance to, I think I kind of skirted around the imposter syndrome part because I had that opportunity where like, kind of no one's looking over your shoulder and you just get to kind of experiment and try things. Then 6 years into my career, I moved to a school district position. And that's when imposter syndrome just like hit me hard. Like I basically told myself, I have no idea what I'm doing. And, the compare and despair, the just all of that on your nervous system will lead you to burnout for sure. I started to dread work. I started to just all this nervous energy subconsciously, right? Like I didn't have a good awareness back then of it. But I was just burned out. Like, so I was dreading work. And then the other behaviors started coming in. Like I was overeating. I was back then it wasn't a social media. I'm dating myself terribly, but it was, we didn't even have Netflix then, but I was staying up too late, watching shows. I would get the Sunday scaries so bad that I would stay up way too late, eat so much, and then the next morning feel just like physically like hurt myself. Right. And so, the exhaustion and just literally feeling sick. And then it's like a whole cascade. So then on top of that, like knowing I was doing these things and feeling so guilty and like really like self-loathing and self-punishment, like, why did you eat that? And why did you stay up so late? And so then that's a whole other layer, so I just was, and then shame, right? And mm-hmm. just causing complete burnout and dread. And so my escape plan for that was, okay, so I had always been interested in psychology and I had always been interested, I used to read self-help books and all kinds of stuff like that. So I said, well, I will become a life coach instead and I'll quit being an SLP. And so I did that in 2012. I got my certification to be a life coach from the life coach school. And the thing that happened was, and I did not know this was going to happen at all. Like I thought that I needed to escape from this situation, my job, and do something else to solve this problem. But really what it is I learned in the process of becoming a life coach and using all those tools, I actually learned how to create a job that I loved and just fall in love with my job. But also learning how to set boundaries, learning how to trust myself, letting myself experiment, letting myself get things wrong and not beat up on myself. And it sounds really easy, but that is a skill that nobody teaches us how to do. So, what happened in the process of that is by the time I got all done with that, like there wasn't this urgent need to quit my job because I literally learned to love it. And I was able to put some boundaries around it and create a beautiful space for that in my life. And so I'm still in the same district and I'm still a full-time SLP. And I'm also a life coach. So I just learned through all of those tools, learned how to make my job generative instead of draining. And I was like, oh my God, people need to learn this because no one's teaching this. So
no, you're exactly right. I mean, I feel like it's almost, and maybe it's changed now, but back in the day when I got out of grad school as well, nobody really talked about this, and no one talked about imposter syndrome. And it seems like it's rampant. And you said something really interesting that I hadn't connected before, because usually I think about, just workload, caseload, feeling stretched too thin, all those types of things lead to burnout. But I hadn't really thought about imposter syndrome leading to burnout, because you never feel like you're accomplishing what it is you need to do, or almost like it's the energy of feeling like you're a fraud, almost of like, I really don't know what I'm doing, like expelling all that energy. And then you're exactly right. It just becomes this vicious cycle where you feel that way. So you do things to cope with it, and then you feel bad about those things. So then you do more of those things, and it just becomes this hamster wheel.
Yes, it's pretty common, actually. Yeah. And normal.
Yeah, and I think just having, yeah. And I think you're right. Normalizing that it's not something that you should feel ashamed of, is feeling like imposter syndrome. But you're right, figuring out what can we do about it, what strategies. So, because it is just interesting how rampant it is. So it's obviously something we need to address.
Yeah, totally.
Well, and I'm just curious. So, I mean, it sounds like you learned about burnout from going through it yourself, and then just becoming more educated about it. But I'm just thinking back, I remember, I think it was I did early intervention. So going into homes, and I feel like it was about 6 years in that I started feeling like, I just go through these spells where I'm like, I don't want to do this. I just feel really unmotivated. And I didn't really even know what it was. This is before burnout became this
thing, right?
word that everybody knows. Yeah. And I remember talking to a physical therapist that I worked with at the time, and said, I'm just feeling blah. And she goes, yeah, but you know what? I just go about once a year. I have the same thing. It lasts about this long. This is what I do. And then it passes. So I was kind of like, okay, this will pass. But that was the first kind of conversation that I'd actually had with anybody about it. And again,
we weren't a very aware thing for her to say, right? Wow.
Yes. Yeah. And it actually helped me a lot, because I thought, this too shall pass. But when you're working with people, and from all of your experience, what does burnout look like for most people? And I know there'll be some differences, but just what are some of the common things to watch for?
Yes. So it is true. Like burnout syndrome, it's become a thing now, right? Yeah. And I think really it mimics the symptoms of anxiety and depression, and it's caused by work-related stress. So, but I think before we even get fully to that, you're right. There is this it's kind of a disengagement. You're just going through the motions. You feel like you're kind of pushing yourself through. You're just kind of making it work. It can feel kind of robotic. And so that's why I think because for most of us, I think our culture perpetuates just like perfectly hidden burnout. It kind of normalizes those underlying or those beginning signs of burnout, because on the outside you might look completely functional, right? But really you're just kind of going through the motions and forgetting, I say some of the early signs are you forget to do, or you stop doing the things that you love to do. You just, or you let go of that project that you wanted to work on, or another thing I say is perpetual panic planning. So that's when you are up in the morning and you're panicked because you don't know what you're going to do that day. So you lose your ability to be creative, your ability to problem solve. You're in SLPs, we love our brains on default. We just love to make things complicated, right? So you lose your ability to, back up a little bit and simplify things. We will dive right into making things complicated. And so I feel like that's kind of how it starts. And then you'll see more of the physical manifestations and like the more deep dread and anxiety. Like I'm an anxious person. Like that's kind of my baseline. I just know how to, I deal with anxiety on a daily basis. That's my, it's kind of my baseline right now. I mean, and it has improved, but I think that's pretty common with SLPs.
We'll be right back to our interview. Take a moment to stretch your legs, but don't go anywhere because we want to talk to you about our podcast partner, Med Travelers. Med Travelers is an industry leader in allied travel career opportunities for a reason, featuring exclusive jobs at top-tier facilities across the United States, higher earning potential, W-2 employee status, and a flexible schedule. Med Travelers is your advocate for career success. Make sure to visit medtravelers.com to discover how Med Travelers can help drive your career forward. Again, go to medtravelers.com to start your travel journey today. And now back to the show. So it sounds like, it kind of starts with, I remember as you were saying this, I'm thinking, yes, I remember actually working with a kid thinking about my grocery list. And I'm like going through the motions, doing the work, but I wasn't there. I was elsewhere, kind of just like you said, robotic. And so I think that was when I was thinking, oh, this is weird. This isn't like me. But I'm curious also because you did mention also that it kind of mimics some of those depression type symptoms. And so do you feel like being able to differentiate if it is burnout, does it, like on the weekends, do people become themselves again, or do you feel like it bleeds into everything and then it's hard to differentiate?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really it goes into your whole life. Like that's why I always talk about like the work-life balance. Like I wish people would stop saying that. That's not, because you have a life and just work is like a part of it. You're not supposed to like balance those two out, right? Like, but that's a common like mental construct that we have in our culture that leads to burnout, right? You're not supposed to balance your work with your life. Like it's a part of your life. And, I went off on a tangent there, but I think that construct really, it causes us to like try to like separate the two of like your work and your life and you can't really do that, right? Work is a part of your life, but by definition, burnout is basically stress and anxiety and depression too, caused by chronic work-related stress. But it goes into everything. It impacts everything. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, a lot of people you're either like spending your whole weekends working or you have to spend your whole weekend in your pajamas. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I do that all the time. But if you feel like you can't do anything else.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And I would love elaborate a little bit more on that concept of not, because I do think that along with burnout, I'm hearing that everywhere, work-life balance. And in my head, I always think about it as, you've got to make sure you're putting as much time and energy into your life as you are to work. But tell me a little bit more about what your thoughts are on why it doesn't make sense to you, that work-life balance. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, because I think, what if you made your work a part of your life as something you genuinely love? Like, what if you thought of it like that? And I think like if you're in burnout, like that might be like a huge stretch. So like, don't feel like you have to think of it like that. But
today I love this.
Right? Like
yesterday I could not get out of bed.
It's okay. Like we're human. We're not going to love every second, right? Yeah. That's normal. We're going to have parts of our job that we don't like. We're going to have parts of our job and our life that we dread sometimes. report writing, but just saying.
For example.
Okay. You'll see that I have ADHD. Bring me back to the question.
Well, I'm here for you. So just elaborating on, and you did a nice job of that. I was just not thinking about it like, oh, life is one bucket, work is another bucket, but looking at it as a blended where I don't dread work so much that I have to put it in its own bucket. It's
right. Yes. Yeah. Because even that concept it's almost like, right. You have to put it in this bucket so that you can contain it there. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I'm all about boundaries. But I just like to, we spend a significant amount of our time being at work, so what if that is part of your life? And what if you could make it a part of your life that feels generative and enjoyable, at least for parts of it,
that makes
right?
more sense. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. That's an interesting way to think about it. And I hadn't thought about it that way before. So, and I know, you alluded to this a little bit. I always wonder too, because, I'm a speech pathologist. That's what I've been my whole career. And I imagine that any field that you can experience burnout, whether it's doing, a software engineer, or I think it's easy to think, oh, it's those professions that you're giving to other people all the time. But do you feel like it's more rampant in these types of fields, or do you see it across all fields?
I think you can totally see it across all fields, but I do think it's more rampant in our field, like at fields of education, fields of healthcare. We have a little mix there as SLPs. A lot of us are women. We're caregivers, and not to, I want to just go back a little bit because I do want to acknowledge that, it's chronic work-related stress, right? So, and a lot of that stress in our field comes from just literally having a workload that is not congruent with our work schedule. Like there's literally not enough time allotted to do the things, right? So I just want to acknowledge that, that's a huge issue. And so I started thinking about, well, how did we get there? How did these expectations get so impossible? And in working with SLPs for a while now, I've really uncovered 3 common mental constructs or patterns that I believe have been ingrained in us and caused, this burnout culture. And the first one is, SLPs were perfectionists, just our training, our, we get into these elite grad schools, and it's our training, we're just trained cultural, familial, our education system to, do it right, do it correctly, right? Which causes us to just probably, overwork, overanalyze, spend a lot of mental energy creating, trying to reach impossible expectations for ourselves. The next one is, hyper productivity programming in our culture, where basically, subconsciously we're trained into thinking, my worth as a human is determined by what I produce. Right? Not that we consciously walk around saying that, but subconsciously we're, I have to be productive. Or someone will say, oh, it was the weekend. I wasn't productive at all. It's like, well, you're a human first. So, that overworking, that trying to constantly overproduce is exhausting, right? We're just that will take us to burnout as well. And then the last one is like our tendency to people please. Right. So, and that's literally like, I don't know if you've ever heard of the trauma response fawn, like make sure everyone's happy, be nice, don't upset anyone, follow the rules. We tend to have that ingrained in us. And so, it has us just agreeing to a lot of stuff that we can't do or shouldn't do, or, but it's kind of like we're to a point of where in a lot of places where we've created like impossible expectations for ourselves and we're burned out.
Yeah, this is so, I'm just thinking as you're saying this, like, okay, we're perfectionists. We can't say no, and there's no physical way that we can accomplish everything that we need to in a day. So of course it's going to lead to burnout. It's like, oh yeah, and then I think too, some of our settings, like let's say if you're in a medical setting and then there's these really unrealistic productivity expectations, but you're celebrated if you can, you are, 90% productive. And so it's almost like it just celebrates that idea, which probably doesn't help too, because it's like, oh, today I wasn't 90% productive. Maybe tomorrow, I'll try again tomorrow. And so, yeah, this makes perfect sense why we are ripe for this in this profession, probably others as well, but we really do have a lot of things that seem like they were already vulnerable to this.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yes. And I think too, it's not something we walk around saying, oh, we don't like do these things on purpose. We don't purposefully, it's really subconscious, I believe. All these patterns really, really impact, every decision that we make on a subconscious level, even. So yeah, it's gotten, I think burnout culture it's really become the norm. Like you see, like I see all kinds of memes for like, I need a glass of wine, and not that there's anything wrong with that at all. But it's been normalized. Burnout culture has almost been normalized, especially for women.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And it's almost been normalized to the point where it's not, and we're going to get into some preventative tips here in a minute, but it almost is like you don't hear about how to prevent it. It's just, oh, more wine, or, or this culture too of, oh, I worked all weekend. And it's almost, that's celebrated sometimes, and that shouldn't be. And so instead of it being that competition of I was so productive, I worked all weekend, it should be normalized that, no, I didn't do a thing all weekend. And that should be celebrated more than never giving yourself those breaks or working yourself to death and then saying, well, this glass of wine should help me. Yeah. We wish, but it doesn't always. So
I like to talk about that word, being a professional, because in our field, at least the way I took it is I took it to mean like when you're a professional, what that means is that you get your stuff done no matter what it costs you. Like that's kind of what I was taught, maybe not just inherently, like be a professional, get things done correctly. Whereas in other fields, being a professional just means like you get paid for the expertise and knowledge that you have. And if something takes longer, I use the example of like an electrician or something. If something takes longer than expected, you just, you pay them for that. Like they don't like say, oh, well, I'll just make it work and I'll be professional and complete my professional responsibilities. But I really think that we think of it in a different way, and we need to change that.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I want to go back to something you said too, that even from the beginning, it's because I know for many of us, it's you get through high school, you go to undergrad, you hope that you're going to get into grad school. You get into grad school, you complete grad school, and then you're supposed to get out and get a job. And what I feel like I'm seeing more is just instead of an excitement to start your career, that new grads are getting out of school and they're already completely burned out. Yeah. What are you seeing in that front?
Yes, completely. When I was coming out, I thought, I didn't think that, well, I can't be burned out because I'm just starting. But it's like, yeah,
this is the beginning.
You're burned out in grad school. Let's be honest, right? Like, yeah, I totally see that. I think it's just become almost the norm. It's been very normalized in our culture. So, we have to start deconditioning that.
Mm. And what do you think, what can a new grad do to help prevent starting out burned out? What are some things that even before they finish school that I know it'd be great if everybody could say, well, I'm going to take 2 months off and travel before I start. But, now we've got people coming out with these ridiculously high loans. It's like, I got to get a job. I got to start working right away. I got to finish my clinical fellowship. Yeah. So what advice could you give to people before they finish school so that they aren't just fried on day one?
Yes. So one thing I recommend, I think that we forget that we're scientists and that most of us literally have either a Master of Science or Master of Arts. I have a Master of Arts. Mm-hmm. So we're scientists, we're artists. And okay, so letting yourself experiment, on a daily basis, because you have enough knowledge, because I think, I feel like that helps with the imposter syndrome. It's like, scientists literally, that's what they do. They experiment with things and they don't make it mean something bad about themselves if it goes wrong, right? They just tweak it the next time and then keep going. That's the purpose. Just remember that you're a scientist and you have enough knowledge to try things, tweak as you go, and just allow yourself that space to be creative and experiment. So there's that piece. I think the other piece is, I always say, in your schedule, always put in, we don't schedule our downtime, right? We don't do that. But I like to teach thinking about your downtime with as much importance as you would a hair appointment, a dentist appointment, right? One of my clients was like, well, if I didn't show up to my dentist appointment, they'd charge me, right? They would charge me and I wouldn't miss that, and I thought, and then I asked her well, what is the cost of you missing that space and that time that you need for yourself? Our brains need space. We cannot go back to back to back. It's just humanly impossible. Your brain needs space in order to be creative, in order to solve problems, in order to be able to, simplify things and make decisions. So that's another thing. It's thinking of your downtime as like you would an appointment that you schedule and that you show up for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is, you hit the nail on the head. And I've actually this year started I block off and it just says walk. And I go for a 30-minute walk. And it's, I realized that if things got busy, that was the first thing to go. And I finally had to say, well, why am I putting myself last? Because then I have nothing to give eventually when you put yourself last all the time. And so you're right. You have to put it in there and you have to, and I know that not everybody has that luxury of saying like, I'm going to go 30-minute walk, but even if it's, I'm going to go 15 minutes and eat lunch somewhere other than my desk or in front of my computer. Mm-hmm. And I tell new grads this all the time, that when you're making your schedule, let's say whether, it's a school or even medical, sometimes this is possible, block out time, but that's sacred. It's, don't, even if it's, this is my paperwork time, mm-hmm. that is sacred time. Don't let that be the first to go. Look at that, just like you said, as if it was a dentist appointment or a hair appointment. You're still going to go. You've got to look at it that same way.
Yes. You wouldn't miss those, right? You'd still show up,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And being committed to that for yourself.
Exactly. Because you also thinking sometimes another trick I do is, what would I tell a friend?
Oh, right.
Would I say, oh, you should absolutely give up that time. You should absolutely never eat that away from your computer. Like, you wouldn't tell a friend that.
Right.
So treat yourself just as good as you would treat somebody else.
That's so good. So good. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I'm wondering too, it's not just new grads, obviously, that come out burned out, but come out of the field burned out, but even if for those that have been in the field for a while, what are your thoughts on somebody who's maybe 5 years in, 10 years in, 20 years in, and starting to feel rumblings of some of those signs of burnout?
Yeah. So I think what can happen is, so you've had this like functional level of burnout where things kind of become robotic. And on some level, I think there isn't anything wrong with parts of that. Sometimes you just are doing the things, right? But sometimes, when you have that dread and when you're just like kind of feeling like you have to drag yourself through, then what starts to happen is your body, you'll get headaches, right? You'll get my thing is like, I'll get a kink in my neck, right? That's like the whisper from my body. And, stomach problems, autoimmune issues. It can be like the body can do weird things in response to stress, right? So, I think your body, a lot of times it just won't lie for you. Gets to a point where it won't lie for you. And you have to look at some of these things like, what am I doing? And I think that's hard because, like I said, burnout culture's really been normalized.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, I notice it if it's my sleep is the first thing I noticed is like, I'm waking up, I'm not sleeping well. And then of course you start the day with less coping skills and that becomes this vicious cycle. So that's usually where the first thing I think is, okay, what's going on? Like, I'm not, I'm either having trouble going to sleep, trouble staying asleep. That's a telltale sign for me.
And those other, coping things that might be, I think, there's nothing wrong with using, however you cope, but sometimes on the back end, it can have a negative consequence. Like, overeating and over drinking, over social media, overworking, over exercising, whatever it is, all of those types of coping things that can, once they start having a negative impact on the back end, you see those things too.
Yeah, and all of those things are just Band-Aids. They don't really go to they're just kind of numbing agents to a certain extent. They don't really hit what's the root and what can I do to prevent this? And I want to talk a little bit too about just what is your work as a life coach, and what does that look like? And specifically when you're working with an SLP, if an SLP comes to you and says, help, what does that look like as a life coach?
Yeah. So, and a lot of people ask me the question like, well, what's the difference between a therapist and a life coach? And the way I like to describe it is that a life coach really focuses on your future self and start boldly creating and intentionally claiming a life. It's going to sound like hokey, right? But a life that you feel jazzed about, right? And just like starting to allow yourself and make it safe for yourself to honor the things that you want and you desire. So that's that. But when I work with SLPs specifically, like the first thing that we look at is we take a really loving look at your schedule. We do like a loving audit of your schedule. And, because one of the first things we uncover is that, your schedule has to be congruent with your workload. That's another little caveat that I'll say is like, all of us need to use the word workload. No matter what your organization uses, always use the word workload, because we all, as SLPs, we know that caseload is a really dumb way to allocate for our the amount of work that we need to do. So no matter what, always use the word workload. We're going to start reprogramming everything in our field. Okay, I got off topic there.
No, I'm here for you. Listen, this is what Jonathan deals with all the time with me. He's like, okay, come back. And I love the idea of workload, because you're exactly right. If you're seeing a student 30 minutes a week, it's not 30 minutes a week. There's a lot of other things that go into that it does become the workload, not the caseload. Yeah. But so when you're starting with an SLP, you do a loving look at the schedule and say, okay, what's the workload? And then that's where you left off.
Yes. So we do an audit. I have we do a time journaling just so we can collect some non-judgmental data about what they're actually doing in a day and what isn't included, what needs to be included, and from there, sometimes there's a level of, oh, well, we can simplify this, or there's some efficiency hacks that we can do here. Sometimes there's some of that, which is great. But sometimes we've just like efficiency hacked ourselves to death. So that's not something we're working on. Sometimes it's really like, so you got that clarity about the space that you need to get the work done. And it's literally dealing with and making it safe for your nervous system to make the ask for what you need and boldly be able to do that for yourself. Because that is not an easy thing for us to do as women, as SLPs, right? And just you're just like presenting the facts of, not only presenting the facts to yourself, but presenting the facts to the people that, are, who allocate your job services, which I always say, like, you are the one that always allocates how much time.
It almost makes me think of like if you're trying to make a budget and you're thinking, where's all my money going? And then you really just take a deep dive and you're like, oh, I didn't think about that $10 and I didn't think about that amount. I didn't think about. So it's almost like you're doing that with a schedule, is having somebody else kind of go through it with you and say, not only where could we be more efficient, but also where can we set some boundaries? What can we say no to? What is a absolute, what is a would be nice if you could, but almost even it sounds like helping prioritize as well.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
Prioritize. And then, having really clear facts. I like to say, like, your schedule is just math. It's not drama. It's, so I had a client who realized like she was spending a lot of time scheduling things, meetings, and coordinating that stuff, but none of that time was in her schedule. So, she, and then, presenting, like, is that really what you want SLPs spending their time on? Spending 1-2 hours a week on scheduling, right? So she was able to have that clarity to present that and say, let's look at some solutions, because I do need this time in my schedule, because it's part of, what I'm expected to do for now. But just having that, I like to say, like, all the things need a mental parking spot on your schedule. Because otherwise, that's why I always say your to-do list could get so long and just drains a lot of energy from your mind and body, when you're continually not getting through your to-do list.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Because then you feel like you're not accomplishing anything. But it almost sounds like, too, that you're in some ways also an accountability partner, where it's, okay, we're doing this, but then I'm going to be checking in to make sure you're actually sticking by what we're talking about, so that you don't continue to go down the burnout road. Is that accurate?
I mean, there is naturally a piece of that too, while you're learning. But by the end of my program and working, what I really like my SLPs to come to is being able to just have self-trust, like being able to show up for yourself in a loving, compassionate way. And that is a really bold, courageous thing to do in our culture, to be honest. Like, it sounds like just this simple, airy thing, but it really is a skill. It really is a skill. So by the end, I really like you to have that skill of being able to lean on yourself and trust yourself and be compassionate with yourself.
Yeah. And I think these are all so important. And I think these are things that we do forget, that we need to love ourselves just as we would love another family member. And if you do love, trust, listen to yourself, then you are going to be able to better prioritize what serves you, what doesn't serve you. Because I think sometimes too, and I've fallen into this, where we can't say no, but then we end up overfilling our plates, and then we're resentful. Yeah. And it's like, but I didn't say no. And now I'm mad at this or this situation or this person. I'm frustrated. So it does, I think a lot of it, you're exactly right, stems from that, just coming back to loving and trusting yourself enough to know what it is you need.
Totally. And I think, as women for generations, like, we were taught that on some level, if we say no, or if we don't overextend ourselves, that someone else is going to suffer. Like, that's the programming that we were taught, but that's actually a lie. In the bigger scheme of things, that's actually a really deep lie that we've been told. But I think that is just so ingrained in us on such a subconscious level.
You're exactly right. I mean, what I always remind myself is the world will keep spinning. The world is not going to stop spinning because I don't attend or do A, B, or C. And when you're working through this program with the SLPs, who is kind of your typical demographic? Because I'm thinking this would be a great gift for a new grad, is like to start out with these skills that you start out from the beginning, is understanding this. And it's so much easier to start out this way than to then be, 10 years in and trying to undo everything. Yeah. So who is your typical client that you work with, your SLP client?
So I work with new grads. I work with people in the middle of their career. I work with some people that are like, I need to get through 3 more years and I'm not going to make it. So it's the whole range. But what you said, like, sometimes I get thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, if every SLP started, learned about the techniques that I teach, like, then I'm like, oh my God, we could eliminate burnout culture in our field. I'm like, oh my, like, I just like I'm like, holy cow, that's really important. So one of the common results that people get are they just get like literal time back. They get like 10 to 15 hours of their time back. And then, I start to, and I add that up. I'm like, okay, that's 500. And if it was 10 hours a week, say that's 520 hours a year. And if you have that skill, like say just over 10 years, it's 5,200 hours. It's 216 days and it's 7 months. So it's like, oh my God, like what if you created, over that time, you've created like 7 months of space for yourself. Like, do you know how much that's going to impact you over, exponentially over time? It's like, sometimes I'm just like, oh my God, this is so important.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. And time is a precious commodity, and you do only have so much of it. And so, I mean, I know that many people I've spoken to that are now remote after COVID, and they've said, I have 10 hours a week back from not driving. Yeah. That's 40 hours for a month. Right. That is a lot. You can do a lot with that amount of time. So I think you're right, is looking at it like, what is your time worth? Because we only have so much and it is a precious commodity. So I love that that's some of your messaging, because I think that helps really hit home that, wow, I'm getting this much time back to do some things that I want to do, spend time with my family, have a hobby.
I love to call it,
sit on the couch and binge watch.
Instead of time, I call it space. Because our brains we need space. Because here's what we'll do on default, right? We will fill it with things to do, and then that will become a thing.
You're right.
Right. So
you're right.
That's why I like to call it like, oh my gosh, give yourself space. Because when you can give yourself space, holy cow.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at it, because you're right. I mean, if we have a closet that's half empty, we'll feel like, oh, we got to fill it up. Put more stuff. So you're right. If you feel like, oh, I have time, I also true. I'm there with you. So, and when you're doing this, you mentioned a program, when you're working with an SLP, how long is that program? And I know it's probably different based on what their needs are, what they're doing, but about how long do you partner with the SLP?
Usually it's 6 months. So I'm mostly doing small group work. So, and my Stop Dreading Mondays program is a 6-month program. And I still have a couple one-on-one spaces in my schedule, but mostly I do small group work, and we work for 6 months. And one of the big things is we decondition all of those patterns that I talked about, that perfectionism, that people pleasing, that hyper productivity program, really working on, yes, we'll see where we can simplify things. We'll see where we can make things more efficient, but also just working on the, first of all, uncovering all those mindsets and those constructs that we're unconsciously making decisions based on those subconscious constructs and not realizing how it's impacting us. So, we do that awareness work. And then we also do just working with our nervous system and our bodies to make it safe for us to literally make decisions, from a place of our desires and our creativity. Yeah.
It sounds very holistic, but I also love that you really seem to focus on prevention and treatment. So it's like, what can we do going forward, but also undoing some of what we've done. And I love that it's that small group as well, because I do feel like it's that where you can see, I'm not the only one, and really kind of going through that process together.
Yeah.
Is it people that from all parts of the country? Is it so
all parts of the world? Really?
Oh.
Yeah. But mostly US based and Canada based.
Okay.
But I've had student from Ireland and couple potential from Australia. So it's like, it's just like so fun. This is, it's not just here, it's everywhere. And one little thing I'll say is, when you were talking about treatment too, is one of the things I watch out for when I was talking about creating space for yourself and putting that in your schedule and creating downtime for yourself, is that when you are when you're in that restore mode and you're in that recovery mode, it will look very like lazy to the part of your brain that causes burnout. So you'll notice like you'll start judging yourself when really you're just in recovery. You need that restorative time and that recovery time. And so just watching out for those times, like, oh yeah, I knew my brain was going to call myself lazy, like, right? But this doesn't mean I'm lazy, right? I'm going to allow myself to have this space right now.
Yeah. And it's almost like you said, undoing that self-talk and what we've taught ourselves is normal. So I love that you even identify these are some things that your brain may be telling you, but this is what it means, and this is what we're going to do about it. Because I think that if you didn't talk about that, and all of a sudden you're thinking, oh, I feel so lazy, I've got to, then you get back in your same patterning versus, oh, I remember, Angie talking about this, and yep, my brain is telling me that I'm lazy. However, it's not. It's space, and I'm creating new patterns and new ways of thinking. So I think that's really critical, and I love that you do that.
Yeah. It'll almost feel like a bit of a panic response in your body. Like you'll notice, you're like, oh gosh, something's gone terribly wrong here. It's like, nope. And creating that safety to give yourself space. Yeah.
And how many are in the groups that you work with? About what's a small group consist of?
It's usually like 6 to 10. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how often do you all meet?
We meet for our direct coaching as a small group once a week. We do take the last week of every month off. And I always say, don't take it off your schedule. Keep it on your schedule, and we create space for ourselves to either, do like a little exercise or assignment that I have given them, or it's like literally creating that opportunity for you to have downtime or creative time. But we meet for the most part once a week for the direct coaching. But then we also have videos, and we go through some workbooks, and we have a daily practice that we go through. I usually say, I do have people like create space for 20 to 30 minutes of time where you're going to be checking in with yourself and doing some journaling work and doing the work that the deconditioning work that we'll be doing together.
Yeah, it almost seems like this would be such a great, I'm thinking of how many times even myself or other SLPs have thought, I need to change settings. I need to do something different. But before just diving into the next thing and taking that, that expression, wherever you go, there you are. Yeah. So if you've got those patterns and the ways of thinking in this setting, you're most likely going to take them with you. So it almost seems like this would be such a great thing to do as you're recognizing, I'm not feeling that passion. I'm feeling this lackluster. I've got these signs, but instead of just jumping from one thing to the next, to really take this 6-month deep dive with you. And I'm thinking just even personally for myself, that this would really help me figure out, is it changes within me that I could make that could help me to be happy with what I'm doing now? Or really is there, because there are some times where it's like, even after you make those changes, this job no longer serves you and you do need to change settings or do something different. So I'm just thinking of all the people I'd recommend this to that are like, the grass is greener over there. Yeah. I know if I go over there, it's going to change everything, but that's not always the case.
Right. But when you do make that, yeah, and I think so, but you want to be making that decision from not feeling like you have to escape from something, right?
Yes.
And you want to, sure, you can make a change, but making sure you like your reasons and you have a lot of clarity around it. And, you just want to feel good about it, right? And not feeling like like you're escaping something, basically. Right.
Like make the choice not from your brainstem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a good one.
It needs to come as your high brain, not your low brain. So if it feels like a fight or flight, then it's probably not being made from the right place.
Yeah, and right, and then but creating compassion for the human responses that we have, right? And yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like you're helping give permission to people to not be so hard on ourselves and to give ourselves the same grace that we would give anybody else. And it's almost like sad that we need that permission, but I do feel like you said, it's almost rampant where we have to undo so many things. So now if one of our listeners, and I'm thinking of all sorts of people that I'm going to recommend to, but if somebody wanted to work with you, what would be the steps? What steps would they take to get started on that process? Do you start do you have different cohorts that start, or what does that look like?
Yes. So, to get you can either find me on social at Angie Merced on Instagram or Angie Merced on Facebook. I also just mention quick, I have a free Facebook group called Unstoppable SLP Burnouts that has lots of free resources in it, has a course in there, worksheets, all kinds of things in there that you can access for free. But you just DM me, or you go to my website and schedule a consultation with me. And then I like to talk to people one-on-one to just see if the program, if they're in a good space for it, if it would be fun for them, if it would be transformational for them. And so we book a consultation and I tell you all the details and we talk about what's going on with you and if it would be a good fit. And then we go from there. My next program is opening up April 19th is the first day. But if you sign up ahead of time, I book a one-on-one with you. So if you sign up within the next couple weeks, I can book a one-on-one so we can have time together.
Yeah, I love that. And we'll put all your contact information in the show notes too, because if people want to get in touch with you via your website or Instagram, we'll put all that info there. And say one more time, what is the name of the free Facebook group?
Okay. The free Facebook group is called Unstoppable SLP Burnouts.
Okay. Unstoppable SLP Burnouts. Okay.
And
I love that.
It's not easy to find, but if you go to the guides tab, there are videos and courses and workbooks in there you can access. But then also, post and all kinds of videos there to access. And then my website is slpburnoutcoach.com.
So that's easy to remember. And I do love also that you are an SLP, because I know of other life coaches, but they aren't necessarily discipline specific. So I love that you get it, you've been there, you're in the trenches, and we're in a place too where you felt like you were headed down that path and have this newfound joy in your profession. So, and the fact that you've taken the steps to help other people, I think it's such a cool program you've developed.
It's so exciting that I think about, like, oh my goodness, like we could change the whole culture. Like that just makes me feel so excited to think about that. Yeah.
And I think too is, even again, going back to if as a newer grad, I think this is great, because if people come out, then I think that's also where great change will happen. It's changing that culture from this next generation, where that's the norm, not what we've been doing that isn't working as well.
Yes, totally.
So what's next for you professionally? You've got this great coaching program that you've done. You're working actively as an SLP. What's on the horizon for you?
Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. I got asked to be, so I'm just like this person who became a life coach and had this idea and just kept going with it. And now, like, it's really humbling to think, like, I get to do this powerful work with SLPs. And so I got asked to be the keynote speaker at the Indiana Speech, Language, and Hearing Association convention in April. So I'm really excited about that.
That's awesome.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just this person who had this idea and just had the courage to to keep going. And here I am. I like to say I'm terra-sighted. I'm excited and terrified.
I love that.
So I'm going to be doing that, but doing more, for districts and for organizations, and doing some in-services. And I want to be more available for that kind of stuff too, to just spread the word to more people.
Yeah, I would love university programs
right?
become more aware of your work, because I feel like even if, doing a shortened version of that program for people, again, while they're still in school, I think is just, because you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
And you're helping give that knowledge. So I love that you had the courage and the idea, and you're exactly the perfect person to be doing this keynote speech, just because of everything you just said. You're giving back to this SLP community, I think, in a really powerful way, and in empowering this group. So I thank you for your work, and I think only exciting things are going to come.
Yes, it's thrilling. At the same time, like, just a normal person just trying things, right? Like, that's literally.
Hey, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yes. Putting yourself out there. And Well, I thank you so much. And again, we're going to put all of the information. I encourage everybody to go to your website, SLP Burnout Coach, go to your Instagram, go to the Facebook. I really think this is an incredible offering if for anybody who's feeling those tinges or is in deep, to really just take a step back and give this to yourself to see. It's like you owe it to yourself to try to find joy again in a career and see if, making Mondays not feel so painful. So, so we'll put all that information on our notes. And thank you so much, Angie, for being here and for doing what you do.
Thank you for having me and giving me space to do this.
Yes.
I honor you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And that wraps up this episode. Thank you for tuning into SLP Full Disclosure. For more information about this episode, check out the show notes on our website at medtravelers.com/SLP Full Disclosure. And don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe so you never miss a guest. Are you interested in becoming a travel SLP? Visit medtravelers.com to learn more and explore the exciting opportunities we offer at top-level facilities across the country. Also, a special thanks to Jonathan Carey for producing this episode and Aiden Dykes for the music and editing. And as always, this episode was powered by Med Travelers. See you next time.